The first mistake we made was thinking humans were weak. The second mistake, we thought we had killed them all. My name is Corvin Thex, and I am a Vexian strategist who has spent the last 3 cycles documenting the most catastrophic military failure in galactic history. What you are about to hear will challenge everything you believe about warfare, about survival, and about the species we so foolishly dismissed as primitive meat sacks from a backwater world. 3 years ago, the Galactic Consortium declared victory over humanity. Their homeworld, Earth, was nothing but cosmic dust. Their colonies had been systematically eliminated, their fleets scattered atoms in the void. We celebrated in the grand halls of Nexus Prime, toasting to the end of the human plague that had dared to resist our expansion. But here's the thing about humans that we never understood. They don't know when to quit. The distress signal came from Outpost Zeta-Nine, a mining station on the edge of Consortium space. Standard raids had been happening for months, small-scale attacks that we attributed to desperate remnants of human military forces. Pirates, essentially. Annoying, but hardly worth the attention of our primary fleets. That was our third mistake. Commander Velox Prime was the first to respond to the emergency transmission. His voice, usually steady as quantum steel, cracked with something I had never heard before, genuine terror. Base Command, this is Velox Prime. We have a situation at Zeta-Nine that requires immediate— No, that's not strong enough. We need every available ship, every weapon, every strategy we have, now. The transmission cut to static. Within 6 hours we had lost contact with 3 more outposts. Not destroyed, mind you, lost contact. There's a difference, and that difference would haunt us for the next 18 months. I was part of the investigative team sent to assess the situation. Our ship, the Dominion's Fist, was a battlecruiser designed to crack planets. We approached Zeta-Nine expecting to find debris, maybe some clever human booby traps. What we found instead was a fully operational station with all lights on, all systems running, and absolutely no one answering our hails. Captain Morek 7, a veteran of 40 campaigns, ordered a boarding party. I still remember the look in his triple eyes when the first reports came back. Sir, the station it's intact, but everyone's gone. Gone how? Bodies? Evacuation pods? No, sir, just gone, like they walked away from their posts and never came back. Food is still warm in the mess hall. Duty logs show normal operations until exactly 14 hours ago. Then nothing. That's when we found the message. Scrawled across the command center's main display, in what our analysts later confirmed was human blood, were 3 simple words: I am here, not we, not the resistance, just I. One human, one single, solitary human was somehow responsible for the disappearance of 437 Consortium personnel across multiple facilities. The absurdity of it should have been laughable. Instead, it was the most terrifying thing I had ever encountered. Because if one human could do this, what did that say about our victory? The answer came faster than we anticipated. 3 days after discovering Zeta-Nine, our own ship's crew began to vanish. Not all at once, you understand. One by one during sleep cycles, during routine maintenance, during what should have been the most secure periods of our journey. Security footage showed them walking calmly to airlocks, to waste disposal units, to the reactor core. Not fighting, not struggling, just walking. We realized we were being hunted, but by what? Our sensors detected no other ships, no weapons signatures, no energy readings that suggested hostile presence. Whatever was taking our people operated beyond our understanding of warfare, beyond our comprehension of technology. Captain Morek 7 ordered the ship to full alert status. Emergency protocols were activated. No one was to be alone, ever. Armed guards were posted at every critical system. We thought we were being clever, adapting to an unconventional threat. We were wrong. The human didn't need to be aboard our ship to destroy us. She was already inside our heads. Yes, we know that now. Her name was Kira Thorne, and she was the last surviving member of Earth's Psychological Warfare Division. While we were busy obliterating human worlds and fleets, she had been developing weapons that could turn our own minds against us. The first indication came when sensor operator Quinn 12 began reporting impossible readings. Ships that appeared and disappeared, energy signatures that made no sense, gravitational anomalies that defied physics. We initially dismissed it as equipment malfunction, But when 3 other operators reported identical phenomena, we began to understand. She wasn't just hunting us, she was making us hunt ourselves. The human brain, it turns out, is remarkably adaptable when it comes to psychological manipulation. But Consortium minds, we had evolved for order, for structure, for predictable patterns. When those patterns were disrupted, when our perception of reality was systematically undermined, we became vulnerable in ways we never imagined. Kira Thorne had turned our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. By the time we realized what was happening, half our crew was gone, not dead, just gone, and the remaining half was beginning to question whether their crewmates had ever existed at all. Memory is a fragile thing, especially when someone with Kira's skills starts poking at it. Captain Morix 7 made what he thought was a tactical decision. He would flood the ship with memory-stabilizing drugs, lock down all systems, and wait for reinforcements. It was a sound strategy, the kind of methodical approach that had won us 1,000 battles. But Kira Thorne wasn't fighting a battle. She was orchestrating a symphony of psychological destruction, and we were her instruments. The captain's own memories were the first to go. I watched him staring at the command chair, confusion spreading across his features like poison. "Who was sitting here?" he asked. "You were, sir." "No, I mean before me. Who was the captain before me?" The terrifying thing was, I couldn't remember either. Had there been a captain before Morix 7? The ship's log said yes, but when I tried to picture them, my mind hit a wall of static. That's when I understood the true scope of what we were facing. Kira Thorne wasn't just eliminating our people. She was eliminating the very concept that they had ever existed. She was editing reality itself, one mind at a time. The Consortium had fought hundreds of species across thousands of worlds. We had faced warriors who could shatter moons with their bare hands, technicians who could hack reality itself, and psychics who could predict every move we made. But we had never faced anything like this. We had never faced a human who had absolutely nothing left to lose. The ship's AI was the next to go, not destroyed, not hacked, but convinced that it had never been programmed in the first place. Our navigation systems began plotting courses to planets that didn't exist. Our weapons systems targeted enemies that were never there. Our life support systems started filtering out gases that our bodies needed to survive. And through it all, Kira Thorne remained invisible. No energy signature, no physical presence, no trace that she had ever existed. She was a ghost in our machines, a whisper in our minds, a shadow that consumed everything it touched. But she made one mistake. She let me remember. Not everything, mind you. I still can't recall the faces of half my crew, can't remember the names of the colonies we visited, can't even be sure that my own memories of childhood are real, but I remember her voice. I remember the moment she spoke to me directly, mind to mind, during the chaos of our final hours aboard the Dominion's Fist. "Tell them," she whispered inside my thoughts, "tell them that humanity isn't extinct. Tell them that we don't forgive. Tell them that I am coming for every single one of them, and when I'm done they will beg for the mercy they never showed my people." The ship's reactor went critical, exactly 67 minutes later. Not from sabotage, not from system failure, but because our chief engineer had become convinced that maintaining power was actually causing the ship to lose power. Logical paradox, but human psychology had long since abandoned logic. I made it to an escape pod, along with 3 other survivors. We drifted for 6 days before a Consortium rescue ship found us. When they asked for our report, I told them everything. Every detail, every impossible event, every moment of psychological warfare that had destroyed our ship and our crew. They didn't believe me. How could they? The idea that one human had outmaneuvered a battlecruiser using nothing but manipulation and mind games was beyond their comprehension. They filed my report under stress-induced hallucination and assigned me to a nice quiet desk job analyzing mineral surveys. But the attacks continued. Outpost after outpost went silent. Ships disappeared without trace. Entire battle groups would simply stop responding to communications. And always, the same message would be found afterward. "I am here." The Consortium mobilized everything. Fleets that could level star systems, weapons that could unmake reality, tactical minds that had conquered half the galaxy, all deployed to hunt down one human woman who had somehow survived the extinction of her species. We found nothing, because Kira Thorne had learned something that we, in our arrogance, had never considered. She had learned that the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb or a fleet of warships. It's doubt, and she was about to teach the entire galaxy what doubt could do to a civilization that had never learned to question itself. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after my escape from the Dominion's Fist, the Consortium made their biggest mistake yet. They tried to negotiate. High Admiral Zeta-Nine, commander of the 3rd Galactic Fleet, actually believed he could reason with Kira Thorne. The arrogance was breathtaking, even by Consortium standards. Here was a species that had systematically eliminated every human world, every human colony, every human life they could find, and now they wanted to talk peace with the sole survivor. The meeting was arranged through intermediaries, neutral territory, full diplomatic protocols, the works. Admiral Zeta-Nine brought a delegation of 12, representing every major consortium species. They came with offers of reparations, promises of protected status, even suggestions for rebuilding human civilization from genetic archives. Thorne came alone. The recordings of that meeting are classified at the highest levels, but I have seen them. My new position analyzing mineral surveys turned out to be a cover for psychological warfare research. The Consortium, it seems, had finally realized they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand. The conference room on Station Meridian was a masterpiece of diplomatic architecture. Neutral colors, perfect lighting, atmosphere controls calibrated for every species present, every detail designed to promote calm, rational discussion. Kira walked in wearing a simple black jumpsuit, no weapons visible, no technology beyond a basic translator device. She looked ordinary. Medium height, brown hair, brown eyes, the kind of unremarkable appearance that could disappear in any crowd. If you passed her on a space station corridor, you wouldn't give her a second glance. That ordinariness was terrifying. Admiral Zeta-Nine opened with standard diplomatic pleasantries, expressions of regret for the unfortunate conflict, acknowledgement of mutual losses, proposals for constructive dialogue moving forward. Political nonsense, basically, but delivered with the polished confidence of someone who had negotiated hundreds of treaties. Kira listened without expression. When the Admiral finished his opening statement, she smiled. "You want to know the funny thing about genocide?" she said, her voice perfectly calm. "It only works if you actually kill everyone." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Frex 12, a veteran negotiator from the hegemony worlds, attempted to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Ms. Thorne, we understand your anger. The loss of your homeworld was a tragedy that we all deeply regret, but surely we can find a path forward that doesn't require continued violence." Kira's smile widened. "Violence? Admiral, Ambassador, delegates, you seem to be under the impression that I have been violent. That's fascinating, because I haven't fired a single shot, haven't detonated a single bomb, haven't killed anyone directly since this whole thing started." Admiral Zeta-Nine's forearms twitched nervously. "The disappearances, the destroyed outposts, the ships that have gone silent. If not violence, then what? Education," Kira replied simply. That's when she began to explain what she had really been doing for the past 18 months, and that's when we realized that everything we thought we knew about the attacks was wrong. Kira Thorne hadn't been hunting Consortium personnel, she had been recruiting them. Every person who had disappeared from those outposts and ships was still alive, still conscious, still themselves mostly. But they had been shown something, experienced something, that fundamentally changed their perspective on the war between humans and the Consortium. "You see," Kira continued, "humans have this interesting psychological trait. When we are backed into a corner, when everything we love has been destroyed, we don't just get angry, we get creative, and I have spent the last 3 years getting very, very creative." She reached into her jumpsuit and pulled out a small device. Nothing threatening, just a simple data pad. But every security officer in the room tensed as she placed it on the table. "This contains the complete records of every human world you destroyed, every colony you burned, every ship you vaporized, every man, woman, and child you murdered. Names, faces, histories, dreams they never got to fulfill, all of it." Ambassador Frex 12 leaned forward. "We are aware of the scope of the conflict, Ms. Thorne. As I said, we deeply regret the necessity of those actions." "Necessity," Kira repeated, tasting the word like poison. "That's an interesting choice of words. Tell me, Ambassador, what was necessary about burning the Children's Hospital on New Geneva? What strategic value did the art galleries on Kepler 442 pose to your military operations? What threat did the retirement communities on Gliese 667 represent to Consortium security?" The room fell silent. These weren't military targets they had discussed in strategy meetings. These were the forgotten casualties, the civilian populations that didn't make it into official war reports. "I have had a lot of time to study your species," Kira continued, "all of your species, and I have learned something fascinating about Consortium psychology. You can justify almost anything if you frame it as military necessity. Your minds are remarkably good at compartmentalizing moral responsibility." She tapped the data pad. "But they are not so good at handling direct confrontation with the consequences of those actions. That's when we understood what had happened to all those disappeared personnel. Kira hadn't killed them, or brainwashed them, or driven them insane. She had simply forced them to experience, in vivid, undeniable detail, exactly what they had participated in. Every Consortium soldier who had fired on human colonies got to experience what it felt like to watch their own families burn. Every pilot who had bombed human cities got to feel the terror of civilians trapped under collapsing buildings. Every strategist who had planned the extinction campaigns got to live through the final moments of the children they had orphaned. Not simulations, not virtual reality. Direct neural implantation of genuine human memories, recovered from the dying moments of Earth and its colonies. The beautiful thing about empathy, Kira explained, is that once you truly feel it, you can't unfeel it. Your people, Admiral, are still alive, still serving in your military, still following orders, but they remember what those orders cost, and they are beginning to ask questions. Admiral Zeta-Nine's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What do you want?" "Want?" Kira laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "I wanted my home back. I wanted my family back. I wanted my entire species back. But those are things you can't give me, aren't they?" She stood up, and suddenly the ordinary-looking human woman seemed to fill the entire room with her presence. "So I will settle for watching your precious Consortium tear itself apart from the inside. Because that's what happens when a civilization built on compartmentalized brutality suddenly develops a conscience." The datapad on the table began to emit a soft beeping sound. Admiral Zeta-Nine stared at it in growing horror. "What is that device?" "Oh, this?" Kira picked up the pad casually. "This is broadcasting a low-level neural frequency that I have been testing for the past 6 months. Nothing harmful, just a little modification to your brain chemistry. Specifically, it's temporarily disabling your species' ability to rationalize violence." The implications hit the room like a physical blow. Every delegate, every security officer, every person present was suddenly experiencing the full emotional weight of every military action they had ever supported, every civilian casualty they had dismissed as collateral damage, every atrocity they had filed under necessary for security. Ambassador Frex 12 doubled over, clutching his head. "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." "I can't," Kira said, and for the first time her voice carried genuine sadness. "Empathy isn't something you can just turn off once you have felt it. Trust me, I have tried." Admiral Zeta-Nine forced himself to stand, though his legs were shaking. "You are destroying us. Our entire civilization." "No," Kira corrected. "I'm showing you what you really are, what you have always been. The only difference is that now you have to look." The recording cuts off there, but we know what happened next. Station Meridian went silent within hours. Not destroyed, not evacuated. Silent. Every person aboard simply stopped responding to communications, stopped following orders, stopped participating in the machinery of war. They had seen too much, felt too much. The weight of collective guilt had crushed their ability to function as soldiers, and it was spreading. The neural frequency that Kira had used wasn't limited to that conference room. She had been seeding it throughout Consortium space for months, carried by the very people she had recruited from those disappeared outposts. Every ship they boarded, every station they visited, every world they returned to became infected with the capacity for genuine empathy. Within 3 months, the Consortium military was in complete collapse, not from external attack, but from internal revolution. Soldiers were refusing orders, pilots were grounding their ships rather than risk civilian casualties, entire fleets were defecting to neutral space, unable to bear the thought of continuing a war they now understood as genocide. The High Command tried everything: memory wipes, drug treatments, complete isolation of affected personnel. Nothing worked. Empathy, once experienced, creates permanent neural pathways. You can't unlearn the ability to feel someone else's pain. Kira Thorne had weaponized conscience itself. The final confrontation came not on a battlefield, but in the halls of the Consortium Senate. High Chancellor Vortex Prime, leader of the most powerful military alliance in galactic history, formally surrendered to a single human woman who had brought an empire to its knees without firing a shot. The surrender ceremony was broadcast across every world in Consortium space. Kira stood before the assembled Senate, still wearing that simple black jumpsuit, still looking like someone you might pass in a corridor without noticing. But when she spoke, her words carried the weight of an entire extinct species. "You asked me what I wanted," she said. "I wanted justice. Not revenge, not destruction, but justice. The acknowledgement that what you did was wrong, the acceptance of responsibility for the lives you took, the commitment to never again treat genocide as a political solution." She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of dozens of worlds. "I have given you the ability to feel what your victims felt, to understand what your actions cost. Some of you will never recover from that knowledge. Others will find a way to live with it, to build something better from the ashes of what you destroyed. High Chancellor Vortex Prime, his voice breaking with emotion, asked the question that everyone was thinking: what happens now? Kira smiled, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, it wasn't a terrifying expression. Now you learn to be better. Because I will be watching. Always watching. And if you ever forget what empathy feels like, if you ever start treating other species as acceptable losses in your political games, I will be there to remind you. She turned to leave, then paused at the chamber doors. Oh, and one more thing. You might want to update your military manuals, because humanity isn't extinct. There's still one of us left, and we have learned that the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb or a fleet of warships. Her final words echoed through the chamber, through the broadcast, through the entire galaxy. It's the simple truth that every life matters, every death has meaning, every choice has consequences, and sometimes, just sometimes, one person who refuses to forget can change everything. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the story doesn't end there. It never does with humans. 3 years have passed since the Consortium's surrender, and I have been tasked with documenting the aftermath. What I have discovered challenges everything we thought we knew about victory, about defeat, and about what it means to rebuild a civilization from ashes. Kira Thorne didn't disappear after her triumph. She didn't retreat to some hidden sanctuary to live out her days in solitude. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She started teaching. The Kira Thorne Institute for Interspecies Understanding became the most influential educational facility in galactic history. Not through force or mandate, but because every species in Consortium space was desperate to understand how one human had so completely dismantled their understanding of warfare. I was among the first class of students. Walking into that lecture hall felt like approaching the den of some mythical predator. Here was the woman who had brought down an empire with nothing but psychology and determination. What kind of monster would she be in person? She was 5 feet, 4 inches tall. She wore reading glasses. She had a habit of losing her stylus and asking students to help her find it. The first thing you need to understand about psychological warfare, she said during that initial lecture, is that it's not really about psychology. It's about truth. Most conflicts happen because people refuse to acknowledge uncomfortable truths about themselves, their actions, or their consequences. A hegemony student, brave enough to speak up, asked the question we were all thinking: how do you live with what you have done? How do you carry the weight of destroying so many minds? Kira paused, considering the question with the same careful attention she gave everything. I didn't destroy minds, she said finally. I revealed them. Every person who broke under the weight of empathy was already carrying that weight. They just didn't know it yet. The pain they felt wasn't something I inflicted. It was something they had inflicted, coming home to roost. She walked to the window, looking out at the spaceport where ships from dozens of worlds docked daily. The real question isn't how I live with what I have done. It's how any of us live with what we choose not to see, not to feel, not to acknowledge about the consequences of our actions. But Kira's greatest revelation came during our 3rd week of classes, when she announced that she wasn't actually the last human alive. The gasps that filled the lecture hall could have powered a small space station. Genetic archives, she explained matter-of-factly. The Consortium was very thorough in documenting everything they destroyed. They kept tissue samples, DNA records, complete genetic profiles, standard practice for studying conquered species. She smiled that terrifying smile we had all learned to recognize. What they didn't realize is that humans had been developing advanced cloning and consciousness transfer technology for decades. We just never had reason to use it until our species faced extinction. The implications hit like a meteor strike. If humans could be restored from genetic archives, if consciousness could be transferred and cloned minds could be activated, how many? Admiral Zeta-Nine asked. He had become one of Kira's most dedicated students, trying to understand how he had been so completely outmaneuvered. All of them, Kira said simply. Every human who ever lived, every consciousness that was ever recorded, every memory that was ever preserved. The technology exists. The genetic material exists. The only question is whether the galaxy is ready for humanity's return. The silence that followed was profound. Here was the ultimate test of everything Kira had taught about empathy, about consequence, about the responsibility that comes with power. The Consortium had the technology to resurrect an entire species, but would they? The debate raged for months across every world in Consortium space. Some argued that bringing back humanity would be justice for the genocide. Others insisted it would be a security threat of unimaginable proportions. Still others suggested that an entire species returning from extinction would destabilize the galactic balance of power. Kira remained remarkably calm throughout the discussions. When pressed for her opinion, she would simply ask, "What do you think is the right thing to do?" The answer came not from government councils or military strategists, but from the ordinary citizens of Consortium worlds. Beings who had been touched by Kira's empathy weapon, who had felt the weight of human suffering, who understood what genocide actually meant. They demanded humanity's restoration, not because it was politically expedient or strategically advantageous, but because it was morally necessary. The first resurrection took place on the anniversary of Earth's destruction. Kira stood in the center of a medical bay surrounded by the most advanced genetic reconstruction equipment in the galaxy, watching as her brother materialized on the restoration table. David Thorne opened his eyes for the first time in 4 years, looked around the sterile medical facility, then focused on his sister's face. "Kira, what happened? Where are we?" She took his hand, tears streaming down her face. "It's a long story, David, but the short version is, we won." The restoration process continued for 2 years. Every day more humans returned from death, families reunited across the void of extinction. Children who had died in the bombing of New Geneva played again in specially constructed habitats. Artists who had perished in the destruction of the cultural worlds resumed their work with an intensity born of having experienced non-existence. But the most remarkable thing about humanity's return wasn't the technology that made it possible or the political will that demanded it. It was how the humans themselves responded to their resurrection. They weren't angry. Oh, they grieved. They mourned for the time they had lost, the experiences they would never have, the friends and family who had died in terror and pain. But when they learned what Kira had done, when they understood how their extinction had been transformed into the galaxy's moral awakening, their response was overwhelmingly focused on building rather than destroying. "Revenge," explained Dr. Elena Vasquez, one of the restored humans who became a leading philosopher of the post-war period, "is a luxury we can't afford. We have been given something unprecedented, a second chance as a species. Not just to exist, but to exist in a galaxy that has learned to value life." The New Earth colony was established not on humanity's original homeworld, which remained a memorial to the dead, but on a previously uninhabited world in neutral space. But unlike the old human colonies, New Earth was designed from the beginning as a multicultural world, welcoming beings from every species that wished to study human approaches to psychology, ethics, and interspecies cooperation. Kira herself never moved to New Earth. She remained on the space station that housed her institute, continuing to teach and to study the long-term effects of forced empathy on galactic civilization. Because the changes she had wrought went far beyond ending a war, crime rates across Consortium space had dropped to historical lows, not because of increased enforcement, but because beings who had experienced genuine empathy found it almost impossible to deliberately cause suffering to others. Diplomatic conflicts that had simmered for centuries were resolved through honest dialogue as species learned to genuinely understand each other's perspectives. Scientific cooperation reached unprecedented levels as researchers realized that collaboration produced better results than competition. Even art and culture transformed. Music became more complex, more emotionally nuanced. Literature explored themes of connection and understanding rather than conquest and domination. Architecture began incorporating designs that promoted psychological well-being rather than displays of power. Kira Thorne had done more than save her species. She had fundamentally altered the emotional landscape of galactic civilization, but perhaps her greatest achievement was what she did in her final years. At the age of 73, Kira Thorne announced that she was retiring from teaching to pursue what she called the final experiment. She had spent decades studying the effects of artificial empathy on other species. Now she wanted to understand what natural empathy could accomplish when combined with advanced technology and unlimited resources. She gathered volunteers from every species in the galaxy, beings who had been most deeply affected by her empathy weapon and who wanted to push the boundaries of interspecies understanding even further. Together they developed what became known as the Unity Protocol, a voluntary neural link that allowed beings to genuinely share consciousness, to experience life from completely alien perspectives, to understand not just intellectually but emotionally what it meant to be something other than themselves. The first successful Unity link connected a Vexian strategist, yes, that was me, a human artist, and a hegemony engineer. For exactly 37 minutes, we shared a single, combined consciousness. We experienced the universe through compound eyes, through human vision, through electromagnetic perception. We felt the satisfaction of solving complex equations, the joy of creating beauty, the pride of developing effective strategies. When the link ended, we were still ourselves, but we were also more than ourselves. We carried within us genuine understanding of what it meant to be alien, to think differently, to experience reality through completely different biological and psychological frameworks. The Unity protocol spread rapidly throughout the galaxy, not because it was mandated or required, but because beings who experienced it found their lives immeasurably enriched by the depth of understanding it provided. Within a generation, the concept of interspecies warfare had become not just politically unacceptable, but psychologically impossible. How do you fight against beings whose minds you have shared, whose perspectives you genuinely understand, whose pain you have felt as your own? Kira Thorne died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 89, surrounded by friends and family from 17 different species. Her final words, according to those present, were, "It worked. It actually worked." She was referring not to her victory over the Consortium, not to humanity's resurrection, not even to the Unity protocol that had transformed galactic civilization. She was referring to the simple idea that had driven her from the moment she found herself alone in a hostile universe, that every life matters, every death has meaning, and every choice has consequences. Today, 5 years after Kira's death, I serve as the director of the Thorne Institute. Students from across the galaxy come here to study not just psychological warfare, but the deeper principles that made Kira's victory possible: empathy, responsibility, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our societies. The memorial wall in our main hall bears the names of every human who died in the genocide, including Kira Thorne herself, but beneath those names is an inscription that captures the essence of her legacy. She was the last human left, and she taught the galaxy to be human, not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the revolutionary idea that even your enemies deserve to be seen as people. And across 1,000 worlds, beings of every species continue to learn what it means to feel, to understand, and to choose compassion over conquest. Kira Thorne, the last human in the galaxy, had taught the universe to be human. It was the most devastating victory in military history, and it was only the beginning.